This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nigerian authorities launch investigations into an unusual number of deaths in Kano State. WHO cautions against the use of untested herbal cures. And we highlight how the pandemic is affecting livelihoods on the African continent. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories lined up this hour. South Africa instructs businesses to take measures to prevent coronavirus transmission in the workplace. And Cote d'Ivoire forward Salomon Kalou suspended for breaching COVID-19 guidelines. Let's begin with the latest figures on COVID-19. Confirmed cases worldwide have now surpassed 3.5 million. Over 250,000 people have died from the virus. 1.1 million others have recovered. A third of the world's cases are in the United States at nearly 1.2 million. It reported around 1,000 new deaths over the last 24 hours, the lowest figure in a month. Nearly half of the global infections are in Europe. Spain has seen the most with 218,000 cases, but Italy has had the most deaths on the continent with 29,000. The UK has Europe's second highest death toll with almost 29,000 people losing their lives. Turkey's confirmed cases are now at 127,000. The Chinese mainland on Monday reported 1 new infection, an imported case, and 15 new domestic asymptomatic cases. Nigerian authorities have begun investigations into an unusual number of deaths in Kano State suspected to be linked to COVID-19. The northern state is fast becoming one of the country's coronavirus epicenters, but COVID-19 is only one of many diseases impacting the country. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam with more details.
A worrying statistics in Nigeria's northern state of Kano. Hundreds dead from the coronavirus pandemic and also from an unknown disease, all within a space of about a week. Authorities say several symptoms of the mysterious ailment are similar to malaria and meningitis, and that has left health authorities confused.
We've also had reports of increasing mortality, and we're carrying out an investigation right now, led on by the Department of Public Health in the Ministry of Health in Kano to unravel what has gone on. You know, it's very difficult sometimes to get the samples you need on time to make a diagnosis, but we're fairly confident that we'll have a very good understanding of what has happened that will guide the rest of our work in Kano.
The deaths in Kano come amid surging cases of the coronavirus pandemic. The state has the second highest number of cases after Lagos, the commercial capital. Now government is prioritizing investigations and testing in Kano.
Our responsibility is to build our capability, build up our arsenal, and make sure that we have the right tools to carry this battle down to the field. We are sending more people there. We've just activated our second lab in Kano. We're looking at a third one by the weekend. The team in Kano is increasing. The government of Kano State is really throwing resources into this response.
A recent report released by government indicates that COVID-19 may be responsible for majority of the deaths in Kano, but it could be another week or two before investigations are completed. The government is also being confronted by Lassa fever, which has killed nearly 200 people this year alone. In the meantime, the state has been placed on a 2-week compulsory lockdown to enable authorities manage the situation. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to Tunisia, where the government has begun easing lockdown restrictions. A number of sectors are allowed to resume operations, and public transport services are partially resuming to cater for those returning to work.
After spending 6 weeks at home, Heikel is finally authorized to open his shop and to resume work. The shop manager is among the Tunisian citizens who will benefit from eased lockdown restrictions.
The gradual lifting of the targeted lockdown is necessary because the economy suffered losses since the pandemic began. Shop owners, managers and employees are in a critical situation to pay bills and earn a living.
The first client was on a hurry. He could neither leave his house nor shop from any boutique in the capital city Tunis. In fact, the lockdown has paralyzed all economic activity.
I'm finally out. I'm changing the mattress where I was sleeping. I've remained at home for 2 months. One must take preventative measures seriously but still resume a normal life.
The Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Health have imposed strict sanitary and security measures at all public transport stations and terminals.
We want to ensure the success of the first day of the targeted health confinement. The situation is under control. Security officers are deployed to sensitize people and to verify that they are authorized to take public transport.
The government is limiting the number of people authorized to return to work. 3 million will return to their posts during the first phase of deconfinement. But experts warn that rolling back lockdown measures too soon could lead to an increase in new infections. Tunisia has recorded over 1,000 cases of infection since the beginning of the spread of the pandemic in the country. Authorities and the COVID-19 task force want to save the economy while putting in place what the government describes as a responsible lockdown exit strategy. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The World Health Organization has urged caution against promoting traditional remedies as cures for COVID-19 without subjecting them to rigorous scientific testing. This comes after Madagascar's president, Andry Rajoelina, began promoting a cure based on the sweet wormwood plant. The WHO's Sub-Saharan Africa office said, quote, even if therapies are derived from traditional practice, establishing their efficacy and safety through rigorous clinical trials is critical, end quote. Now, the heads of several African countries have already announced placing orders or receiving consignments. The WHO said it was working with research institutions to select traditional medicine products that can be investigated for clinical efficacy. But it added that many plants and substances are being proposed without the minimum requirements and evidence of quality, safety and efficacy. All right, so for more on this, we're joined by Dr. Richard Mihigo, who is the Deputy Incident Manager for COVID-19 response in the World Health Organization Office for Africa. Dr. Mihigo, thank you for joining us. So as we just reported, the WHO is warning against using untested herbal remedies. What safety concerns does the WHO have regarding Madagascar's reported COVID-19 cure?
Thank you very much for your invitation. Let me first start by saying that WHO welcomes innovation from all part of the world when it comes to the search for a cure for the COVID-19. And this includes obviously repurposing existing drug, traditional medicines, or even the search for new therapy. We do recognize the value of traditional medicine, and WHO have supported many countries in trying to conduct rigorous clinical trial for traditional herbal medicine, and this has led to the market authorization of several medicine in the region. So with regards particularly to Madagascar cure, for the moment we don't have any data that can help us to make any informed decision. And we would like to welcome any collaboration with the authority on Madagascar to try to understand better. But I believe that our population on the African continent deserve to get access to the safe and efficacy product that fulfill the same standards as international products.
Okay, so you've said that Madagascar authorities have not provided you with any data regarding that cure, as they're calling it. But is there any information that they have given, you know, in regards to tests or recovery of patients?
Well, we do receive epidemiological data, obviously, from Madagascar, like in other countries. But those information doesn't necessarily correlate with the use of the cure you are mentioning. So for the moment, it's very difficult for us to say anything related to that.
All right, so tell us more on what the WHO is doing to help African countries ensure that any herbal remedies are safe and properly tested for their efficacy.
WHO has been actively supporting countries in the WHO region to use traditional medicines. For instance, up to now, clinical trials for traditional medicine has been supported. That has led to market authorization of more than 89 traditional medicines in 14 countries. These range for medicine to fight malaria, diabetes, hypertension, or some opportunistic infection related to HIV. We have seen also working with countries that as of today, 40 countries on the African region have edicted national policies for traditional medicines. So we are really supporting this area and we do value the contribution of traditional medicine as part of the arsenal that the country might have. And some of these traditional medicine that has been put on the market, have received market authorization from countries, have been added to the essential medicine lists of those countries.
All right, Dr. Mihigo, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Richard Mihigo, Deputy Incident Manager for COVID-19 Response, the World Health Organization, live for us from Brazzaville, Republic of Congo. Let's head to Somalia now. At least 6 people have died after a cargo plane was allegedly shot down as it tried to land in the southern town of Baradale. The aircraft was reportedly transporting supplies to be used in the fight against the coronavirus. Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked armed group fighting the Somali government, has a known presence in the area. However, it has not claimed responsibility for that particular crash. Let's get more details now from CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo. He joins us live from Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. So, Abdul, there are conflicting details on the circumstances surrounding that plane crash. What more do we know so far?
Well, Peninah, we can confirm right now that 6 people who are on board that aircraft all died. 2 of them are pilots, a trainee pilot, an engineer, and airline representative, as well as the person whom the cargo was ferrying to the town of Baradale. Now, according to Abdurrahman Ibi, who is a member of parliament here in Somalia and one of the shareholders of these downed aircraft, he says that he has ruled out rather any technical failure as the cause of accident. In an interview with local media, Abdurrahman Ibi says that the plane took off from the town of Baidoa with the humanitarian supplies towards the town of Baradale, that is some 55 kilometers from the town of Baidoa, and when it started to descend into the Baradale airstrip, it noticed so much commotion along the airstrip, and then it had to slide away. And then when it tried to land for the second time, then it was hit by an object. He's not able to identify exactly what hit the object. That's why it's causing so much confusion. He's saying that there was probably a military drill that was taking place in that area, and that should have been the cause of this incident. So far, the Somali government has issued a statement indicating that investigation is ongoing, and they're going to send a team of experts to the town of Baradale to retrieve the black box in order to know the exact cause of the accident. So this incident took place in Baradale, and the airline itself is Kenyan registered, but most of the shareholders are here in Somalia. It carried supplies to support the government efforts in tackling corona, and Abdurrahman Ibi says that the consignment belonged to ICRC, the International Committee of Red Cross, that was supposed to deliver the supplies in that area. So investigation for now is ongoing. The aircraft is owned by African Express Airline and registered in Kenya, and investigation for now is ongoing, but the airport in Baradale is under the control of Ethiopian forces, even though the town of Baradale is under the control of the Southwest Regional Administration of Somalia. So there's so much confusion regarding this incident, but then again, it comes just almost 4 years after a similar incident that took place here in Somalia, where militant group Al-Shabaab tried to down a Dalo airline flight that was headed to Djibouti.
All right, Abdul, thank you for that update. Abdulaziz Bilo live in Mogadishu. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says people providing services to survivors of gender-based violence will be allowed to work. Cases of violence against women and children have been on the rise since a nationwide lockdown began over a month ago. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has admitted that South Africa is one of the most unsafe places for women, further adding that abuse against women needs intervention of the highest form. The president was speaking during a virtual meeting on gender-based violence and femicide. The meeting included participants from government and civil society. They noted that the outbreak of the coronavirus had compounded this issue and presented reports detailing progress in the implementation of an emergency action plan.
The coronavirus pandemic heightens the risk of gender-based violence as women may be experiencing emotional and physical abuse behind the walls of their homes. This calls for heightened responsiveness, greater awareness, and practical measures that need to be taken to assist women who find themselves in vulnerable situations as we speak during this lockdown period.
The United Nations in South Africa, which also formed part of the virtual meeting, echoed this.
While the world is grappling with health issues and grappling with socioeconomic issues, the United Nations has identified violence against women and children as a shadow pandemic. As the pandemic grows, violence against women grows.
Government is making urgent interventions to help those who are suffering from abuse. And as part of those interventions, a number of government buildings have been identified and will be repurposed as survivor shelters.
I will be the first to admit that much more needs to be done in this regard to increase our efforts on prevention. This is an area that we need to focus more attention on so that we are able to prevent acts of violence against women and children. We remain unequivocally committed to the cause of advancing the rights of women and making sure that their rights that are constitutional are upheld.
Despite efforts by the South African government to address the issue, many women and children remain at risk during the lockdown. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
World leaders have pledged billions of dollars towards developing a coronavirus vaccine and treatment. The news follows European Commission leaders and other countries taking part in an online summit in an effort to raise the funds. The participants also aim to coordinate research and make sure poorer countries benefit as well. Naweed Jabakil reports from London.
A global problem that requires a global response. Dozens of international countries have been pledging money to fight COVID-19 as nations look to coordinate forces in the battle.
This virus has reminded us that we have to protect each other if we want to protect ourselves. The reality is that we will have to learn to live with the virus until and unless we develop a vaccine. And this is why we have to join forces and pool our money and our minds to kickstart work on vaccines, diagnostics and treatments against coronavirus.
The conference is co-hosted by 8 countries, including Germany, Japan and the UK. British leader Boris Johnson perhaps more aware than most of the need to combat the disease. He claims he nearly died after being hospitalised with the virus last month.
No one country and no one pharmaceutical company will be able to do this alone. The race to discover the vaccine to defeat this virus is not a competition between countries, but the most urgent shared endeavour of our lifetimes. It's humanity against the virus.
So far, the focus for most countries around the world has been on containing this deadly disease. Many have closed borders, shut businesses and rolled out unprecedented lockdowns in a bid to try and keep down death tolls. But the consensus now is that COVID-19 is here to stay, and so nations may need to work together to chart a way out of this crippling pandemic. Not everyone's on board, though. The United States, which is the worst affected country in terms of total cases and deaths, was a notable absentee. The growing war of words between the US and China over the origins of the disease could be a potential stumbling block for future cooperation. China's representative at the event reiterating Beijing's position.
In fighting the virus, confidence and solidarity are more valuable than gold. Panic and a blame game are more dreadful than the virus itself.
For the countries that did take part, though, the message was clear. Billions of dollars will be needed to continue testing for and treating COVID-19, and perhaps most importantly of all, to find a vaccine that works. Nawid Jabakil, CGTN, London.
China's new large carrier rocket Long March 5B has just been launched into space from China's southern island province of Henan. This is the rocket's maiden flight, sending the first prototype of the country's new manned spaceship into orbit to verify that the design of the rocket and the spacecraft are suitable. The craft is pollution-free. It will be the most powerful rocket when it comes to carrying capacity to low Earth orbit, capable of placing 22 tons of payload into such orbit. You're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. Straight ahead, we highlight how the pandemic is affecting livelihoods on the African continent.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
And now to our continuing series on the impact of the coronavirus on the African continent. Today, we're focusing on how the crisis has affected livelihoods as well as efforts that are being made to help vulnerable communities. Aid agencies operating in South Sudan have launched a program that provides information about the coronavirus to the vulnerable groups they support. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Hassan Konyi lives in a refugee camp near Juba known as Don Bosco. Getting correct information on COVID-19 here is difficult. Most residents don't have access to news via television or radio. Hassan has been educated about coronavirus and preventive measures by a non-governmental organization, World Vision. That means Hassan can now pass on that knowledge to other residents.
Everybody is now staying at home because they are listening to the information we are giving them about the coronavirus. Before we started this awareness campaign, people were not following the directives from the health ministry to avoid social functions. They were not even staying home, but that has changed now.
The stay-home directive is affecting many workers who used to depend on daily income to feed their families.
I have no job now. I am just sitting at home. All work has stopped. I am worried. The little money I have saved is finished.
The World Food Programme says more than half the South Sudan's population of 11 million people were already food insecure before restrictions were put in place to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
There are changes. The changes is that previously we used to provide
the beneficiaries one-man ratio. But because of these changes, for fear of COVID-19, we don't know what will it happen, when will it happen. So we have decided to give 2 months ratio for our beneficiaries.
South Sudan's health ministry has launched a door-to-door campaign in the capital, Juba, to give the public information on coronavirus. Aid agencies say they want to carry out sensitization on the coronavirus across the country wherever they take services to the needy. The government has declared an indefinite partial lockdown, so it is not clear how long the vulnerable people will be facing these extra challenges in their daily lives. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
A group of sign language interpreters in Tunisia have volunteered to translate the state's coronavirus measures for people with a hearing impairment. There are concerns that these individuals may feel isolated and neglected during the lockdown period. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has that story from Tunis.
Shaima is a 26-year-old volunteer who's translating the daily press conference of the Ministry of Health to the deaf and hearing impaired. She's been explaining the prevention measures and the latest data on the contamination, as well as the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
We cannot leave anyone isolated or without information on the coronavirus because it's a threat to public health. I translate for thousands of people on TV channels so that they get informed on the latest news. Hence, they can protect themselves.
Noor is a deaf student. She's married to a hearing impaired person. The couple follows Shaima's translation on social media to understand what is happening in the country during the general lockdown.
It was very difficult to follow the news. My husband and I were completely disconnected from the world when the pandemic began. But thanks to the effort of volunteers who are translating and sharing videos, we are aware of everything.
Noor says she feels safe by following the health ministry's recommendations. She believes that the initiative of translating the official news on coronavirus should be encouraged and generalized so that the vulnerable people are adequately catered for.
Now I know exactly what I must do to protect myself, like washing my hands, avoiding contact and other measures. I just hope that all citizens with other disabilities will also get a similar treatment.
According to the Ministry of Health and the National Observatory on New and Emerging Diseases, disability alone may not be related to higher risk for becoming infected with coronavirus or having severe illness. Tunisian universities are the only higher educational institutions to teach sign language in the Arab region. Civil society activists hope that all deaf and hearing impaired individuals in the world will have access to timely and updated information about coronavirus. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
As the world tackles the COVID-19 crisis, governments are trying to support their citizens, especially those hardest hit by lockdowns. In South Africa, the government has distributed thousands of water tanks countrywide to ensure adequate water supply during the lockdown. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela reports from Johannesburg.
South Africa is a water-scarce country, and the coronavirus pandemic comes at a time when the country is experiencing shortages of water and crippling drought. The water challenges are caused by a number of issues. These include insufficient water infrastructure operations and maintenance, floods driven by climatic variation, and unequal access to water and sanitation. The COVID-19 has highlighted the connection between accessing water and exposure to illness, especially for people living in poverty. Members of this community, for instance, have not had access to clean water for years.
Since we've got the corona situation, and then we started to see people coming with the new tanks, installing them.
I'm next to the tap, but if like I'm not around, it's difficult. But now I'm next to the tap. I make sure that like I've got enough water before I go to job.
Following President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement for government to devise extraordinary measures to slow the spread of the virus, the Department of Water and Sanitation has made urgent interventions.
Our job is to make sure that everybody in South Africa, to the extent that it is possible, has access to clean water, even if it is for a short term, as we build up our systems for a more sustainable future.
Needy communities from the length and breadth of the country are now benefiting from the distribution of water tanks that have been made available by government.
Right now, as of the time when COVID was on our shores, we had to make sure everybody has clean water to wash their hands. So we ordered all the water tanks that we could get, and we then decided to lease water tankers to put water. And we asked the municipalities to identify those places that where people would be most vulnerable or where people congregate, and they have done that. The reports that I've seen, the smiles that I've seen, indicates to me that we've made very good progress, and I'm very happy to see that.
These tanks will assist communities in water-stressed and densely populated areas to wash their hands to ward off the virus. Yulison Jomala for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And over now to the Democratic Republic of Congo. People living with disabilities have been appealing to the government for assistance amid a partial lockdown. The coronavirus has disrupted economic activity and affected the livelihoods of thousands of vulnerable people across the country. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports.
Messages about the prevention of COVID-19 are common in the DRC capital, Kinshasa. The city has the most cases in the country. The government imposed a partial lockdown earlier this month and offered people free water and electricity for the next 2 months. But many communities on the outskirts of the city do not have access to clean water. That has made life difficult for people living with disabilities like Ngoi Kabeya.
I'm asking our government to help us in this difficult time. President Tshisekedi should instruct his staff to provide us food and water because life has become unbearable. God will bless him for that.
Humanitarian agencies have been supporting the government to provide relief items to internally displaced people in conflict zones in eastern DRC. But many vulnerable people in Kinshasa are struggling on their own.
We've seen some people getting assistance from charity organizations during the lockdown, but we've not got any help. Why has our government neglected us?
Officials at the COVID-19 National Task Force say they are doing their best under the circumstances.
We have sensitized the country about the prevention and control of COVID-19 through the media, but we ask everyone to join us in spreading the message about hand washing and social distancing.
But that might not be enough for many. The DRC Constitution provides special protection for people living with disabilities, but many of them have faced discrimination and human rights abuses for decades. Not even the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that the government ratified in 2015 has greatly improved their lives, and now the COVID-19 pandemic has made their plight worse. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Children with disabilities may have underlying health conditions that increase their risk of serious complications from COVID-19. Leon Sinyange reports on how these children in Uganda are coping.
The past 5 weeks have been testing for Tim Wanamama. He has Down syndrome, and coping with life during the coronavirus crisis has been tough.
The first 2 weeks, they were so bored, but after some time they coped up.
During school days, over 80 children play here. Tim now has only a handful to be with. Many of the children at this center were sent home. The few that stayed need extra attention, and this singing is helping them cope with the trying time. The caretakers here say the children miss their friends, but they are teaching them new things to keep them busy.
Their children, you have to be patient and understand them better. We do things and repeatedly actually, compared to the ordinary children.
According to the World Child Organization UNICEF, Uganda has about 2.5 million children living with some form of disability. Authorities say parents and guardians need to help children understand the current challenge.
They are playing a role of many people. They are teachers, they are health workers, because remember, many of those children have health-related challenges, many of them. They are social workers, they need to keep counseling.
While it is still uncertain how soon the coronavirus crisis will end, for these children, their isolation is far from over. They must do whatever they can to get through. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. South Africa instructs businesses to take measures to prevent coronavirus transmission in the workplace.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa's government has instructed businesses to have a clear plan on how they will protect the health and safety of everyone in their workplace. Over 1 million people are expected to return to work this week as some businesses and industries resume operations across the country. CGTN's Lisa Njamela has the details.
President Cyril Ramaphosa last week unveiled new alert levels of the lockdown, which will determine which sectors of the economy would be opened in certain areas. The 5 different levels determine the severity of the lockdown, with 5 being a hard lockdown and 1 being almost completely lifted. From the 1st of May, the country moved to level 4, and millions of people are expected to this week return to work under strict conditions.
Employers must take measures to protect the health and safety of everyone in their workplace. This includes employees of contractors, self-employed persons, and volunteers. The process starts with a risk assessment in the workplace and a clear plan to implement the measures contained in the direction.
And employers must provide each employee free of charge with at least 2 cloth masks to wear while at work or commuting. Social distancing must also be implemented in all common areas in and around the workplace to prevent crowding.
Workplaces must be arranged to ensure a minimum of 1.5 meters between workers. If this is not practicable, physical barriers must be erected and workers must be supplied free of charge with the appropriate personal protective equipment.
Employers are also required to report any diagnosis of COVID-19 at work to health and labor authorities. The minister also announced that employers must screen workers for COVID-19 symptoms at the time they return to work. And if any of them are showing any symptoms, that they must be isolated and arrangements be made for them to go for medical examination or for self-isolation.
The failure to comply fully with the OHSA, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it's a criminal offense. Failure to take necessary measures to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 may result in the criminal prosecution.
To ensure compliance to these new regulations, labor inspectors will monitor and enforce the rules, and employers may be ordered to close business if they fail to abide by the guidelines. Yuli Sanjamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
The pandemic has wreaked havoc across the global aviation industry, leaving a number of airlines on the brink of collapse. In a bid to offset some of the effects of the crisis, Kenya's majority government-owned airline has converted some of its grounded passenger planes into cargo freighters. CGTN's Beryl Oro has that story.
As demand for air travel disappears in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, passenger airlines operating around the world are turning to cargo in order to produce fractional revenue to maintain operations. Kenya Airways has been hit hard by the cancellation of international flights that has left most of its passenger planes grounded. The airline now sees an opportunity in cargo business whose demand is steadily increasing.
We now converted the wide bodies to be able to do the freight to long-haul destinations like Europe, China, even the US, to bring in essentials and also to take vegetables to those places. This is it's probably the only revenue stream that we have currently, so that we can use that money also to continuously sustain ourselves and pay for the bills that we have today.
Kenya's flag carrier recently uplifted 40 tons of flowers and vegetables to some European nations that have started to ease tough lockdown restrictions that had kept people confined to their homes for more than a month.
The economy must keep on running, and that's why, in addition to the medical supplies, we are also having cargo flights. Many of you may have seen, recently we dispatched a Dreamliner 787 to London Heathrow to take fresh produce, which will bring the much required foreign exchange. This foreign exchange is what will help us in terms of making sure that we can actually pay for this kind of supplies. So I would like to thank Kenya Airways for facilitating this transport of both cargo and also medical supplies.
And with the uncertainty in the aviation sector expected to linger in the months ahead, airlines will have to adopt new strategies to remain in business post-COVID-19. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
As the COVID-19 pandemic spreads across Africa, families that are dependent on diaspora remittances are finding it hard to cover their daily expenses. Many say they can no longer access funds from relatives abroad because most of them are in lockdown and not working. CGTN's Hilary Ayasiga reports.
Christine Nantambi is preparing lunch, but she's rationing the food because of a budget squeeze. Her father, based in South Africa, stopped sending money a month ago.
Ever since the lockdown got to Uganda, we've never received any money from him. Yeah, so all that we had, we used it.
The family has adjusted from having 3 meals to 1 meal a day. And they are not the only ones taking a hit from COVID-19. Lydia Luimbas is finding it hard to get help from her husband working in China.
He's not been working for now, and the places where he could reach and send money, they're no more. He cannot move.
Luimbas has been depending on remittances from China, but since the outbreak of COVID-19, that source of funding has since been cut off. She's now looking at her garden to put food on the table. Financial experts warn that the situation is likely to get worse as the virus continues to spread.
We know that a majority of Ugandans working in some of those countries are not documented. So they are not working. Many of them have actually fallen sick of COVID-19. We have received a lot of reports of many Ugandans who have fallen sick of COVID-19. They need to treat themselves. They cannot have enough money to spare to send to their relatives back in Uganda.
A recent report from the Bank of Uganda shows that remittances will fall from the projected $1.3 billion to $955 million by close of the 2019-2020 financial year. And the World Bank has also warned that global remittances will decline by 20% in 2020. But for Nantambi, not all hope is lost. She's hopeful that as major economies begin to ease restrictions, some people will soon get to work and remittances could flow again. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Egypt is borrowing $400 million from the World Bank to fund the country's health insurance system. This is a plan to provide health care to millions of Egyptians who are currently outside the current health insurance model and cannot access public health services. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has the details.
The financial burdens Egypt's healthcare system has suffered from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic has made the country request a 60% increase from the previous $250 million loan from the World Bank. Negotiations began before the pandemic. It's aimed to inject investments in Egypt's new inclusive healthcare insurance system.
That sum must be directed towards the stated purpose, which is the development of health insurance services, primarily to pay for underprivileged Egyptians who cannot afford to pay the premium.
Through this project, the $400 million facility the World Bank is providing will be also directed to develop the deteriorating public healthcare services. Experts are also recommending using that sum to fund programs tailored for medical staff.
In recent years, we have lost some of the most talented medical calibers. They left Egypt looking for more rewarding incomes in foreign countries. This is the biggest threat to the healthcare system. It's easy to purchase infrastructure, but to raise and train doctors is much more complicated.
With a struggling budget, Egypt is paying about $10 annually per capita for its current free healthcare service. The government says the inclusive healthcare insurance system will increase that to about $120. Egypt launched a new healthcare system in Port Said governorship last year. The World Bank's $400 million could help it complete the first phase, which includes the Suez Canal and the Sinai region. The government has divided the country into 6 phases to be completed by the year 2032, the last of which is the greater capital, Cairo. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A hair salon in Kenya's largest slum, Kibera, has created a new spiky look called the coronavirus hairstyle. The new hairdo is meant to imitate what the virus looks like under a microscope. The trend is an example of how service industry workers are finding new ways to attract customers amid reduced traffic due to a partial lockdown. Let's take a look.
Hakuna cha braids, hakuna cha salsa, hakuna cha wig, weave, ni coronavirus mama. Mali huko, kama mkishuke coronavirus.
Hii wakati wa coronavirus tunaathirika nayo. Hii style tunasuka, ndio tunashuka kwa wananchi, ndio rahisi kulingana maisha yamekuwa ngumu duniani kulingana na hii janga la coronavirus. Na kila mtu mahali yuko ni kusanitize, kunawa mikono mara kwa mara, ndio tushinde hili jambo la coronavirus.
Corona imeleta shida, sasa mimi sina ile pesa ya kuwapeleka saluni washuke zile vitu za maana. Sasa ukiona hizi ni corona style, sasa mimi nimeona walete kwa saluni ishikilie tu nywele, sababu uchumi nayo imekuwa ngumu sana.
It's creative, except it looks really painful to do it. Coming up in sports. Cote d'Ivoire forward Salomon Kalou